Hi everyone, my name is Catherine Korstoff from Research Rockstar, and I'd like to talk to you today about some research I've been doing about job titles, specifically job titles related to the broader market research and customer insights professions. Now, I know that alone is a mouthful, right? Customer insights and customer insights, consumer insights, market research. As it is, we have a lot of language that we use when we talk about our general career category. That's a whole topic in and of itself for another discussion. For now, what I'd like to do is just establish that, broadly speaking, we are talking about a category of skills and job titles related to people who are in the broader market research and customer insight space. The data that I'm going to be showing you today is preliminary. It's based on some data and research I've been following and working on since 2016, but it really was earlier in 2017 where I really started to get more robust in the methodology that I was using so that I can do a really great job of understanding really what are the job title trends and what are the job skill requirement trends for those of us who are in this profession. So what I'd like to do is just have a bit of a conversation, show some of my current analysis, and see what questions people might have. So the first slide I'd like to share with you, again, this is preliminary data. Right now I'm tracking over 40 job skills that relate to the category. And what you're seeing here is that I've categorized them into 4 buckets based on frequency with which they appear in jobs. That is, if you're looking at job descriptions, job postings, these are skills that you actually see mentioned in those job descriptions. Now, as you take a look at this, you'll see it's pretty diverse. There are a lot of things that are shown on this particular slide. Now, we have a couple of specific challenges in trying to understand the job skill requirements. One is that some of these job skills are also skills outside of our category. So part of the research and analysis I'm doing is trying to figure out how to fine-tune that so I can get a more accurate count that's relevant to people who are in that broader market research and customer insight space. But let me call out a couple of the things that are mentioned. So if we look over at the top in the red category, customer experience. Not surprisingly, project manager, the word insights in general. Now, those words, again, aren't unexpected. We would expect the job postings in our category would have some of those things. What's really interesting to me is the phrase business intelligence. And the reason why this is interesting is because I personally wouldn't have thought of that as something that would come up so often. But the truth is that it turns out, as I really delved into it, that there are a lot of job postings out there, and I mean a lot, where if you look at what's included in the job, it is about understanding customer attitudes and behaviors. Now, isn't that what we do in the market research and customer insight space? You bet. We seek to discover and measure customer attitudes and behaviors. Yet there are a lot of job titles with the phrase business intelligence featured prominently that also have those responsibilities. Now, not surprisingly, this has to do with an increasing amount of intersection that we see between our career and functional areas that have traditionally been separate. That is, in a lot of organizations, the department that does market research or customer insights or shopper insights is typically different than the department that's doing, say, customer analytics, predictive analytics, that sort of thing. And typically, those were the ones where you tended to see the phrase business intelligence coming up a bit more, but we're starting to see a little bit of blurring between these lines. So it's something that is absolutely worth being aware of, and especially as you're thinking about what types of jobs in the future you might be interested in. You might very well find that there are job postings out there that require, quote, business intelligence that you actually are probably very qualified for. So don't let that phrase throw you. There is a lot of increasing convergence and overlap going on. If we look at the ones in blue, not surprisingly, market research, right? Now, one of the big debates we've often had in the profession is, what's a more popular phrase, market research or marketing research? Well, it is market research. However, you'll notice that I have an asterisk on that too. And the reason why is because, as you probably know, the phrase market research is one of those tricky phrases that get used outside of our profession as well. Very often, if you see a posting for market research, it's actually a job posting where they're looking for people who specialize in stock market research. So again, some of these things with an asterisk are the ones that I'm still fine-tuning so that I can get more accurate counts that are relevant to our career path. A couple of other things that are going on here if we go down to the brown ones. So these are categories where I have found a lot of mentions. We're still at 2,000 plus mentions in terms of being mentioned in job openings. So really common phrases. But when you look at the items in brown, what do you notice? There's an enormous amount of fragmentation and specialization, right? There's some really precise things here. And this actually is consistent with what I see just working with different organizations, people we have as students at Research Rockstar in our market research training classes, where we're seeing a lot of specialists. That is, market research has gotten to the point where you can't be an expert in everything. And I think the skill list kind of backs that up. It's really hard for one person to be an expert in focus groups and predictive analytics and SPSS and market intelligence and so on. It's just too much these days, right? So not surprisingly, we see a lot of job descriptions that mention very specific things. We're seeing a lot of fragmentation, a lot of specialization. Now, on the right side of the slide, I've got a number of things that are in black. These are the job postings that were mentioned less often, but still often. So these aren't bad things by any stretch. These are still popular things, just not as popular as some of the others. And you'll notice that there's some oddities in here. For example, you might say, Catherine, why did you put anthropology in? Well, when I was doing the research, I did see mentions of anthropology in related to postings that relate to ethnographic research. So I wanted to try to capture that. But again, that one has an asterisk as well because I'm still kind of fine-tuning how we're going to capture that in a way that will give us a more accurate count specific to our career paths. You'll also notice that there's an interesting mix of qualitative and quantitative things. Again, this speaks to some of the specialization that I'm seeing in my research. So what exactly precisely is the source of this? I did a lot of work to figure out what would be the best source, and I ended up using two sources. I decided that the best sources for understanding what the skill trends are were Indeed and LinkedIn. The job postings on both those sites include a lot of job postings that are, in fact, relevant to the broader market research and consumer insight space. However, of course, there's overlap. So in my analysis, I do assume that there is overlap. However, I've not fine-tuned that model enough to feel comfortable releasing the specific numbers yet. So what I would say is, even making assumptions about overlap, you've got the most job postings are the ones that have the requirements in red, then the ones in blue, then the ones in brown, and then the ones in black. So it gives us at least a relative priority on what types of skills people are looking for. And of course, being a good little researcher and wanting to give you a visual display, here's a word cloud. Now, I did remove some of the generic terms for skew, but still, if we put it in word cloud form, you know, clearly some things are really popping here. Big data, not surprisingly. Business intelligence, market research, UX research, user experience research is popping pretty high here as well. So again, this is still preliminary. I'm still working on fine-tuning it. But if we put it in word cloud format, I think it's just a nice conversation starter to think about, well, what are the top things? What are the skills that people are looking for when they're looking for these types of professionals to fill their job postings? So hopefully that gives you some good food for thought. All right, I want to wrap up with actual job titles. Now, like with job skills, job titles are challenging to work with. Now, some people have said to me, why don't I use the job titles that come from some of the known job and professional databases? The challenge that I find is that our profession is changing very rapidly. And in fact, as somebody who's been in this career path for over 25 years, I can tell you for a fact that right now, in 2017, I am seeing the most rapid rate of change I've ever seen in this career in terms of skill requirements and job titles. You know, 20 years ago, if you wanted to be in market research and you knew about surveys and focus groups and in-depth interviews, you were golden. It's not the same anymore. It's way more fragmented than that. So figuring out the job titles has been very challenging. It's been really fascinating, but unfortunately the published job title data that you can get from various government and other secondary sources just isn't precise enough to be very meaningful for those of us who are really truly in this career path. So let me show you what I have so far. And again, this is preliminary. So what I've given you here is 4 categories on the right-hand side in terms of, again, just from highest to less frequent job titles. I do need to point out that I'm still working on C-level, C-suite, and VP level job titles, so those are not included. That's a whole conversation. It turns out to be fairly complicated to really get accurate counts on those things. So I'm still working on that. But still, if we put that to the side, we still get some really interesting prioritization here in terms of what are the job openings that are out there and how frequently they occur. So the A items are the ones where we've got a very large number of current job openings in the United States. Market research analyst / manager, not surprisingly, being a really big one. Business intelligence developer. Okay, I know this looks crazy, but it's huge. It's out there a lot, and it often, again, does include things that relate to either discovering or measuring customer attitudes or behaviors. So I can't ignore it in the research, but clearly it has an asterisk on it because I'm still trying to figure out really how do I figure out how to get an accurate count on that for job openings that are relevant to our profession. But the phrase is out there and it's extremely widespread. So there are tons of jobs out there with that phrase in the job title. If we skip down a little bit to some of the items in B, there are some things here that will seem very familiar. You'll see customer insights manager, quantitative research analyst, all good things. But you'll also see some interesting job titles that are more generic jobs, or I'm sorry, broader marketing jobs that actually now have components of it that include responsibilities that relate to customer attitudes and behaviors. So again, I want to include those because they're relevant. So a brand manager now, you'll often see that these people have very clear responsibilities according to the job postings for collecting and analyzing customer data. So there you have it. You might not think you were on a brand manager career path, but maybe you could be with a minor tweak, since obviously there are a lot of job postings out there for brand managers, and they often do require the same skill set that you may very well have as a market researcher or customer insights professional. And then again, you see some really interesting specialties, like all the way at the bottom, UX researcher. Yeah, there are a lot of job titles out there with UX researcher. And again, if you look at what the description is, feels a lot like market research to me. A lot of the same methods, a lot of the same ultimate goals in terms of understanding what's going on with customers and optimizing customer experiences, product development input, and so forth. Anyway, I want to close just with pointing out that these things are all in flux. I am still working on my data analysis. If anybody has any suggestions or wants to continue the conversation, I'm very happy to have that conversation. I also encourage you to follow up if you want to have the conversation truly in more in depth. Let me just share my contact information here. Oh, sorry, I almost forgot one thing. All related to this, I want to just point out that both IDC and Gartner Group have been promoting the idea of a chief data officer as a new job function at the C-suite. And again, I'm going to try to do a better job of following this, but this is new, the idea of a chief data officer or wording along those lines. So it's something that's in my plan, but I haven't been able to fully try to quantify really what's going on there because it is, again, a very new kind of idea. So again, if you'd like to get in touch, if you'd like to have more of this conversation, I welcome questions, I welcome comments. I will keep an eye on the YouTube chat here, but please do follow me on Twitter or check us out. You can always contact me by email as well. Thanks, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. And again, I'm Catherine Korstoff from Research Rockstar, and I'll hope to talk to you again in the future.